Samantha Carter had learned long ago how to keep her face unreadable. A black woman in high finance, she carried herself with that quiet poise of someone who had walked through boardrooms lined with portraits of men who had never expected her to belong. At 43, dressed in a charcoal suit that revealed nothing but confidence, she stepped out of her modest black sedan and crossed the parking lot of Halcyon Dynamics, one of the flashiest tech firms in Atlanta. Today was not a courtesy visit. It was an evaluation $2 billion on the line from Carter Equity Partners, the firm she had built from scratch. She intended to see, with her own eyes, whether Halcyon deserved a place in her portfolio or whether the whispers she had heard about its toxic culture were true. The building gleamed, all glass and steel, a monument to ambition, the kind of place designed to impress journalists and intimidate rivals. Samantha paused for a second before the mirrored fad, studying her own reflection the way she sometimes studied candlestick charts. Neutral, unsentimental, just data. Then she walked inside. The receptionist, a young blonde woman named Kelsey, greeted her with a plastic smile that flickered when she took in Samantha's brown skin and understated style. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "I'm here for my 10 o'clock with Mr. Richard Whitman," Samantha said. Kelsey's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. "Are you here for the administrative interviews? HR is upstairs on the third floor." Samantha didn't flinch. She had heard variations of that line too many times to count. "I have an appointment with Mr. Whitman directly. Samantha Carter." Kelsey tapped at her keyboard, her skepticism barely hidden. "Oh, one moment. Please wait in that area over there." She gestured toward a side cluster of chairs plain, near the elevators view rather than the plush lounge where two white men in designer suits were already being offered cappuccinos. Samantha said nothing. She simply walked to the indicated spot, sat and observed. That was her strength. She noticed the flow of employees through the lobby, overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly white. She noticed how their voices lowered when they caught sight of her. She noticed the VIPs in the lounge, basking in small courtesies she had been denied. Every detail was a note in the score she was already composing in her head. 45 minutes ticked by. No apology. No refreshment offered. At last, an assistant appeared. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Whitman will see you now." Not in the executive boardroom, as she might have expected. Instead, she was led down a corridor into a cramped, windowless meeting space. A table, 4 chairs, stale air. A deliberate downgrade. Richard Whitman barely looked up when she entered. A tall, pale man in his early 50s. He lounged in his chair, scrolling through his phone. His navy suit whispered expensive. His posture screamed entitlement. "Take a seat," he said vaguely, waving a hand without eye contact. 3 other executives, white men, in nearly identical gray suits sat waiting, exchanging faint smirks. Samantha sat. She folded her leather portfolio neatly before her, eyes calm, taking in the body language, the stifled yawns, the calculated neglect. Finally, Whitman dropped his phone on the table and gave her a perfunctory glance. "So, you're here about some diversity initiative?" His voice made the words sound like an inconvenience. "I'm here to discuss potential investment opportunities," Samantha replied evenly. Whitman chuckled under his breath. "Right. Investment." The way he said it, you'd think the idea was absurd. He began a presentation clearly designed for an unsophisticated audience. Cartoonish slides, buzzwords simplified to the point of insult. He spoke slowly, over-explaining basic terms. "We're developing cutting-edge AI for enterprise clients. An algorithm is, well, think of it like a recipe for a computer." He paused, then leaned toward her. "Are you following so far?" Behind him, one of his lieutenants whispered to another. Both laughed quietly. Samantha leaned forward slightly, her voice level but sharp as a scalpel. "Your prospectus mentions a proprietary neural architecture. Could you explain how it reduces inference latency compared to conventional transformers, particularly at enterprise scale? The smirk slid off Whitman's face. He blinked, fumbling with the remote. That's, very technical. Perhaps my CTO could brief you on the complicated material. His eyes darted around, looking for a lifeline. Samantha didn't allow him to recover. And your Q2 filings, you reported a 22% reduction in R&D expenditure while simultaneously claiming expansion of research initiatives. How do you reconcile that? The temperature in the room shifted. Whitman's jaw tightened. He skipped 3 slides with a jab of his finger. Those kinds of complex financial details are beyond the scope of today's discussion. I'd prefer we focus on more appropriate topics. He emphasized the word appropriate with a smirk. Samantha felt the insult land but didn't react. She made a small note in her portfolio instead. Whitman, sensing his authority threatened, decided to double down. He hit the intercom. Let's take a quick break. Kelsey, bring in some coffee. Ms. Carter, how do you take yours? Lots of cream and sugar. I bet. The racist undertone hung heavy in the air. 2 executives looked down uncomfortably. The third chuckled. Samantha closed her portfolio slowly. The soft sound of leather echoed louder than any shout. She met Whitman's eyes without blinking. Before we continue, I'd like to review your diversity and inclusion data for executive roles. For a heartbeat, his composure cracked. Then he forced a laugh. We'll have Marcus, our diversity officer, walk you through that. Marcus Powell, the only non-white face above entry level, entered with a rehearsed slide deck. Halcyon Dynamics is committed to inclusion. Minority hiring increased 8% year over year. What's the retention rate of those hires? Samantha asked. Marcus hesitated. I don't have that data. And promotion pathways. How many people of color reached senior leadership in the last 5 years? Whitman cut in with a wave. We're making progress. Rome wasn't built in a day. Just then, 5 more white executives burst in, laughing about their weekend golf outing. Whitman sprang up to greet them, slapping backs and shaking hands all around. Samantha was left unacknowledged for a full 3 minutes, as though invisible. Finally, Whitman remembered. Gentlemen, this is Samantha. She's here to talk about diversity. No last name, no title, reduced to a first name, reduced to a token. The executives offered distracted nods. One leaned toward another and whispered, loud enough for her to hear, diversity quota. Just play along. Whitman turned back to her with a patronizing smile. Perhaps you'd like to share your journey. Samantha, I'm sure everyone would love to hear your personal story. I'd prefer to discuss market conditions and growth projections, Samantha said calmly. That's not really what everyone's interested in. Whitman interrupted, chuckling. We have analysts for that. What we want is your unique perspective. The unfinished sentence said everything. At that moment, the door opened again. A tall white man in a bespoke suit entered. Whitman shot to his feet. Alan, glad you could join us? He pumped the man's hand with both of his own. Then, with deliberate cruelty, he turned back toward Samantha. Their eyes locked. He clasped his hands behind his back. I don't shake hands with staff. Silence dropped over the room like a lead weight. A few men looked away. One smirked. Samantha didn't flinch. This was no new wound. This was confirmation. She reached for her phone under the table, typed a single word to her waiting team. Execute. Then she rose, her voice calm. If you'll excuse me, I need the restroom. Whitman waved dismissively, already turning back to Alan. In the bathroom mirror, Samantha allowed herself 3 long breaths. Not from anger, but focus. She dialed a number. David, she said when her CFO answered. Initiate phase 1. Both packages are ready. Start signaling concerns quietly to analysts. Make it look organic. Yes, ma'am, David replied. She ended the call and studied her reflection. The woman staring back was the same one who had been mistaken for an assistant 100 times. But today, she carried power they had never bothered to recognize. Back in the boardroom, Whitman laughed with his men. Another diversity box checked. Moments later, his assistant rushed in, pale. "Sir, you need to see this." On her tablet, the stock ticker showed Halcyon down 1.5% in the last 15 minutes. No news. No explanation. "Probably noise," Whitman muttered, but unease flickered in his eyes. When Samantha returned, executives were checking phones nervously. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her tone innocently curious. "Nothing you need to worry about," Whitman snapped. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have real business to attend to." "Of course," Samantha said smoothly. "I'd just like one final word with you. Alone." Whitman agreed impatiently, ushering her into his private office. She closed the door behind them, still perfectly composed. "Let's review today, shall we?" she began. "You kept me waiting 45 minutes. You seated me in the lobby rather than the VIP lounge. You presented kindergarten-level slides. You asked if I could follow basic concepts. You addressed me only by my first name. You reduced my presence to a quota. And finally, you explicitly refused a handshake." Whitman tried to interrupt, but she held up a hand. "All of which," she continued, "I have documented. Georgia is a one-party consent state. I recorded our entire interaction legally." His face drained of color. At that moment, his phone buzzed. Urgent. Major shareholders. Then again. And again. Samantha watched him sweat, watched him type frantically into his computer, watched the moment the truth hit him, the moment his search results revealed exactly who she was. Samantha Carter. Founder and CEO of Carter Equity Partners. $50+ billion under management. Known for pulling investments from companies with discriminatory cultures. Whitman's jaw trembled. He stumbled toward her, voice suddenly syrupy. "Ms. Carter, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," she said, rising to meet his height. "You made yourself perfectly clear." And with that, she walked past him, past the executives who had laughed, past the security guards who now stood stiffly at attention, past the whispering employees watching their stock ticker bleed red across the lobby screens. By the time Samantha reached her car, Halcyon's value was down 3%, and the reckoning had only just begun. The tinted windows of Samantha Carter's sedan closed out the chaos behind her. Inside, the hum of the engine felt like a metronome, steady, grounding. David Monroe, her CFO, sat in the back seat with a tablet already open, his fingers dancing across the glass. Two other senior associates occupied the opposite seat, quiet, efficient, eyes sharp. The team she trusted to execute moves that could tilt entire markets. "Initial signals are working," David reported, rotating the screen so Samantha could see. Halcyon Dynamics was now down 3.2% in after-hours speculation, despite no official announcements. "We nudged 3 analysts at different firms. Each received the same whisper. Leadership instability. That's all it took." Samantha nodded, expression unreadable. "Good, keep the temperature low for now. They'll assume coincidence. We want them guessing." The car eased onto Peachtree Street, blending with Friday traffic. Samantha gazed out at the skyline towers of glass built on ambition and ego. She knew those towers well. For 2 decades, she had been invited into their conference rooms only to be treated like an interloper. The mistake Richard Whitman had made wasn't unique. It was systemic. But today he had handed her the perfect evidence, gift wrapped in arrogance. "Portfolio package is ready," said Lillian Price, her strategy chief. She handed over a slim leather binder filled with documentation, transcripts of the morning slights, time-stamped and cross-referenced with industry research. "We've got comparative statistics showing how Halcyon trails peers on diversity, retention, and promotion. If this goes public, They'll look archaic. Not yet, Samantha murmured. Evidence is leverage. We don't spend it all in one place. The sedan slid to a stop outside Carter Equity's downtown headquarters. Unlike Halcyon's ostentatious glass fortress, Samantha's building was subtle, almost quiet in its elegant sandstone exterior. Steel-framed windows, artwork from underrepresented artists displayed prominently in the lobby. She liked it that way. Strength didn't need to shout. Inside the executive floor, her staff had already gathered. Screens across the walls displayed real-time feeds, Halcyon's tumbling ticker, trending hashtags on social media, chatter from financial blogs beginning to notice unexplained volatility. Phase 2? David asked. Samantha took her seat at the head of the long walnut table. She let silence stretch just long enough to remind everyone that decisions here weren't made in haste. Phase 2, but subtle. A drip, not a flood. Within minutes, coded calls were placed to trusted journalists. Nothing explicit, just nudges. Hearing rumors of leadership missteps, potential governance concerns, enough to raise questions without providing answers. Markets hated uncertainty more than bad news. By late afternoon, Halcyon was down 5%. Inside their glittering campus, panic rippled. Richard Whitman slammed his office door. Sweat beaded at his temples, though the AC blasted cold. Around him, his executive team shifted uneasily. The bravado of the morning dissolved into nervous energy. "What the hell is happening?" he barked. "There's no news or no leaks. Why is our stock tanking?" "Analysts are spooked," muttered James Porter, head of investor relations. He held up his phone. "They're asking about leadership concerns. No one will say where they heard it." Whitman rubbed his temples. "This is retaliation. That woman," he caught himself. "Ms. Carter, she must have connections feeding this." "Sir, she's not just an investor," Porter said carefully. "She's Carter Equity Partners. 50 billion under management. They can move markets by blinking." For the first time, the room saw fear flicker in Whitman's eyes. That evening, Samantha sat in her private office, the city lights glittering beyond the glass. She watched Halcyon's chart dive like a hawk in freefall, 7% down by market close. "Messages received," David said softly, sliding a fresh report across her desk. "Employees inside Halcyon are already whispering. Anonymous posts online about discrimination, about ignored complaints. The story is starting to breathe on its own." Samantha tapped her pen once against the leather portfolio. "Good. Let it breathe. The market should believe this is organic." "Do we escalate tomorrow?" Lillian asked. Samantha leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. She remembered the sneers, the whispered jokes, the deliberate humiliation of being reduced to staff. She thought of the receptionist directing her to the side lobby while white men were served coffee in crystal cups. She thought of every woman, every person of color who had walked into places like that and walked out smaller. "Yes," she said finally. "Tomorrow we escalate, but not with fury, with precision." Halcyon's headquarters the next morning felt like a bunker under siege. Executives arrived early, eyes glued to their phones. Shareholders were demanding answers. Employees whispered in hallways, wondering if their stock options were about to evaporate. Whitman stormed into the boardroom, tie askew. "Damage control," he ordered. "Now, draft a statement about our commitment to diversity. Spin yesterday as a constructive dialogue." James Porter cleared his throat. "With respect, sir, Mrs. Carter recorded everything. If she goes public, denials will backfire." "Then we discredit her," Whitman snapped. "Dig into her past. Everyone has skeletons. Find them." Silence. No one moved. The old confidence in his voice rang hollow. Meanwhile, in Carter Equity's strategy room, Samantha reviewed the next phase. Screens lit up with prepared press packets, redacted transcripts, legal briefings. Her team moved like chess masters, every word chosen, every leak calibrated. We don't need to release everything, Samantha said. Just enough to make Halcyon's board question Whitman's leadership. Let them do the rest. David smiled grimly. Board infighting will sink him faster than we ever could. In as they spoke, a new alert scrolled across the ticker. Halcyon stock, 9%. Trading volume spiking. Analysts on CNBC speculating about internal crisis. Samantha closed her binder with quiet finality. He wanted to treat me like staff. Let him feel what happens when the staff finally refuses to serve. By evening, Halcyon's fate was no longer in Whitman's hands. The board of directors convened an emergency call. Voices sharp with accusation. Shareholders threatened lawsuits. Employees leaked internal memos. The story Samantha had seeded now grew wild, uncontrollable. And Richard Whitman, once so smug, so untouchable, sat alone in his office, staring at a headline on his laptop. Anonymous sources, Halcyon Dynamics, CEO faces questions over discriminatory behavior. The article didn't name him explicitly. It didn't have to. The market had already decided. The boardroom at Halcyon Dynamics felt like a pressure chamber. The blinds were drawn, fluorescent light humming above, casting every face in a pallid glow. At the far end of the long glass table, Richard Whitman tried to keep his composure as his board of directors filed in. None of them smiled. Richard, began Elizabeth Warren, not the senator, but Halcyon's board chair, a former Wall Street banker with a reputation for precision. Her voice was clipped, icy. What in God's name happened yesterday? Whitman adjusted his cufflinks, though his palms were slick with sweat. A misunderstanding. A routine meeting blown out of proportion. Some activist investor with an agenda. Some activist investor? Elizabeth cut in. She slid a printout across the table. Bold letters screamed from the page. Carter Equity Partners considering withdrawal amid culture concerns at Halcyon. She's not a fringe activist. Richard, Elizabeth continued, she runs one of the largest funds in the country. She manages more than our entire annual revenue and assets. And now we're down 11% in 36 hours. Whitman's throat tightened. He had weathered market dips before. But this was different. This was personal. And worse, it was public. It crossed town. Samantha Carter watched the same coverage from the polished calm of her office. Her executive team surrounded her, laptops glowing, coffee steaming. David Monroe turned up the volume on the television. A CNBC anchor spoke with the smooth cadence of inevitability. Halcyon Dynamics shares are plunging again this morning on speculation that Carter Equity Partners, led by CEO Samantha Carter, may reconsider its proposed $2 billion investment. While neither side has issued a formal statement, sources close to the matter suggest concerns over corporate culture, specifically at the leadership level. Samantha allowed herself the smallest exhale of satisfaction. This wasn't vengeance. It was leverage, and she wasn't finished. Phase 3? David asked, fingers poised over his keyboard. Samantha nodded. Release the transcripts, selectively, enough to show a pattern. Within the hour, 3 journalists received encrypted files, not the entire recording, just the sharpest cuts. The receptionist asking if she was there for an administrative interview. Whitman explaining an algorithm as if to a child. The condescending question, "Are you following so far?" And of course, the line that would echo across financial media for days. I don't shake hands with staff. The first story broke online at 2:14 p.m. By 2:17 it had gone viral. By 3 a.m. Halcyon was trending on Twitter with the hashtag #HandshakeGate. Inside Halcyon, pandemonium, phones rang non-stop. PR advisors shouted conflicting strategies. One faction insisted on immediate apology, another on denial. Richard Whitman tried to drown them out, but the noise only grew louder. This is out of context, he protested, slamming a fist on the table. Everyone knows investors try to bait you in meetings. We don't owe her an apology. But no one was listening. The board was already whispering among themselves, glancing at their watches as if counting down to the inevitable. That evening, Samantha walked into a quiet restaurant in Midtown where she had reserved a private room. Waiting for her were representatives from three other major investment firms. She greeted each with a handshake firm, unhurried, the kind Whitman had denied her. "You've set quite a fire," said Harold Kim, managing partner of Orion Capital. "Fires clear forests," Samantha replied calmly. "Sometimes that's the only way new growth can emerge." The investors nodded. They knew the truth. One firm moving against Halcyon might have been survivable. Four firms? It could collapse the company entirely. "What's your endgame?" Harold asked. "Not destruction," Samantha said. "Transformation. They either change leadership and culture or they bleed out. Either way, the market learns the cost of arrogance." By Monday morning, Halcyon Dynamics had lost 17% of its value. Employees flooded Glassdoor and anonymous forums with stories. Managers mocking accents. Women pushed out of promotions. HR bearing complaints. On Bloomberg, a headline rolled across the ticker. Carter Equity's Olivia Johnson moment. Can Samantha Carter force corporate America to reform? Whitman watched from his office, rage boiling beneath his skin. He called his legal team. "We're suing for defamation," he growled. "On what grounds?" one lawyer asked gently. "She released your own words, and Georgia law protects one-party consent recordings." Whitman threw his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. That afternoon, Samantha received a message from Halcyon's board, a request for a private meeting, not with Whitman, with the directors themselves. Her team debated. "Could be a trap," Lillian warned. "Or the beginning of surrender," David countered. Samantha considered. She thought of the receptionist, of the smirks, of Whitman's sneer. She thought of the employees whispering online, voices finally breaking through. "We'll meet," she said. "But on our terms, here, at Carter Equity." When the Halcyon delegation arrived the next morning, Samantha greeted them in her own boardroom. The contrast was stark, a long table surrounded by executives of every background, women and men, Black, Asian, Latino, white. Competence radiated from every seat. Elizabeth Warren spoke first. "Miss Carter, we recognize the gravity of the situation. Mr. Whitman's behavior was unacceptable." Samantha waited. Silence was her weapon. Elizabeth continued. "The board is prepared to make leadership changes, effective immediately." "And your culture?" Samantha asked. "A new CEO doesn't erase rot." Elizabeth slid a folder across the table. Inside, a detailed plan for reform, transparent pay audits, blind recruitment protocols, mentorship initiatives. "We're willing to commit, but we need your capital to stabilize the market." Samantha closed the folder slowly. "Words are not commitments. Actions are. Replace Whitman. Announce your reforms publicly. Then we'll talk." Elizabeth nodded. The board had no leverage left. That evening, the announcement hit the wires. Halcyon Dynamics CEO Richard Whitman resigns amid investor pressure. The statement was carefully worded, citing leadership inconsistent with company values. But the world knew the truth. Samantha Carter had forced out a billionaire CEO without raising her voice above conversation level. At Carter Equity, her staff erupted in quiet celebration. Screens showed Halcyon stock stabilizing. Investors cautiously optimistic under the promise of new leadership. David turned to Samantha, eyes shining. "We did it." Samantha shook her head. "No, we started it. The reveal is complete. Now comes the transformation." She looked out at the city skyline, the lights flickering like a constellation of unfinished battles. Richard Whitman was gone. But the system that had built him, that was still standing. And Samantha Carter had every intention of toppling it, one boardroom at a time. The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta towered like a sentinel of stone and steel. Its columns rose heavy against the gray morning sky. indifferent to the men and women shuffling through its metal detectors. Among them, Richard Whitman cut an oddly diminished figure. Once photographed on magazine covers with his arms folded in triumph, he now entered flanked by attorneys, head slightly lowered, the cameras outside capturing every flicker of his jaw. Inside, in the marble corridors, echoed with reporters' questions. Mr. Whitman, do you regret your comments to Samantha Carter? Are you concerned about the shareholder lawsuits? Will Halcyon survive without you? He ignored them, jaw locked, eyes forward. The hearing room was already packed. Former Halcyon employees sat shoulder to shoulder with journalists and industry observers. At the back, quietly present, was Samantha Carter. She did not speak to reporters. She did not need to. Her presence alone drew whispers. When the panel of commissioners filed in, silence descended. The proceedings began. Whitman's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Stephen Cole, rose to deliver opening remarks. My client has been portrayed unfairly in the press, he declared. Mr. Whitman is a traditional business leader caught in a changing cultural climate. He has always valued merit above all. Any isolated remarks have been taken out of context. The commissioners listened with stony expressions. Then came the plaintiff's counsel, representing a coalition of former employees. A petite black woman named Denise Alvarez spoke with quiet ferocity. This is not about isolated remarks. This is about a documented pattern of discrimination spanning years. Emails instructing recruiters to prioritize culture fit code for excluding women and minorities. Performance reviews systematically rating underrepresented employees lower despite identical output. Promotion records showing white men advancing twice as fast as equally qualified peers. This is not a misunderstanding. This is systemic, murmurs rippled through the room. Whitman took the stand on the second day. The transformation from confident CEO to embattled defendant was striking. His tailored suit still fit, but his posture sagged. He tried to project dignity, but his voice carried strain. I have always maintained a meritocratic environment, he said firmly. If certain groups weren't advancing, perhaps we should examine their qualifications rather than assuming bias. The plaintiff's attorney pounced. So your position is that the dozens of complaints filed, the disparities in promotion, the retention failures, these all come down to the supposed lack of ability of women and people of color? Whitman shifted in his chair. I'm saying the world rewards excellence. Those at the top earn respect. That's just business. From the back, Samantha watched without expression. She had heard versions of that argument her entire career. Just business. As if business excused cruelty. The turning point arrived on the third day. Jessica Chen, Whitman's former executive assistant, took the stand. Her voice shook at first, but steadied as she recounted her experience. Mr. Whitman had different protocols for visitors. If they were wealthy, white, male, he demanded we treat them like royalty. If they were women, especially women of color, he called those meetings diversity obligations. Before Ms. Carter arrived, he told me to downgrade the room, to delay her, to make her wait. He said, she swallowed hard, then forced the words out. He said, she's staff until proven otherwise. Gasps rippled through the hearing room. Whitman's lawyers objected, but the damage was done. The recording Samantha had legally made was then played over the speakers. Whitman's voice filled the chamber. I don't shake hands with staff. The sound was damning in its simplicity. No spin could erase it. By the end of the week, the commission announced its findings. Mr. Richard Whitman is found to have personally violated multiple federal anti-discrimination statutes. The lead commissioner intoned, he is hereby barred from serving as an officer or director in any public company for a minimum of 10 years. Financial penalties will be assessed, and full disclosure of his record will be required to any future business partners. Whitman slumped in his chair, face drained. Cameras captured every second. In the hallway afterward, reporters swarmed. Samantha found herself momentarily face to face with the man who had once refused her handshake. "You destroyed everything I built," Whitman muttered, voice low, eyes burning with resentment. "You built something that should never have existed," Samantha replied calmly. "A company that shut out brilliance because it didn't look like you. That wasn't strength. Richard, that was rot. You had no right," he hissed. "I had every right," she said, stepping closer, her voice still even. "You had power, and you used it to diminish others. I had power, and I used it to create consequences. That difference matters." He had no answer. The next morning, the market delivered its own verdict. Halcyon Dynamics, under interim CEO Patricia Hayes, saw its stock stabilize. Analysts praised the board for swift action. Employees reported cautious optimism, and a headline blared across Bloomberg: "Market proves Whitman wrong. Diversity push boosts Halcyon's recovery." The narrative was sealed. Whitman's claim that inclusive leadership would weaken the company was shattered by numbers on the very stock ticker he once worshipped. Meanwhile, Samantha returned to her office. She did not revel. She did not gloat. She reviewed reports, listened to employees' testimonies, tracked Halcyon's compliance with the reforms. "This isn't about one man," she told her team. "This is about an industry that let men like him thrive for decades. And we're not finished." Her words carried weight, but also warning. The reckoning of Richard Whitman was only a beginning. That night, alone in her penthouse, Samantha stood by the window overlooking the city. The courthouse where Whitman had fallen was visible in the distance. She thought of the receptionist who had dismissed her, the smirking executives, the board members who had looked away. All of them had been part of the same pattern. But she also thought of Jessica Chen, who had found the courage to testify, of Patricia Hayes, who now led Halcyon with steady resolve, of the young analysts she mentored monthly, hungry for a world where their worth wasn't questioned. The arc was bending, slowly, painfully, but bending. And Samantha Carter intended to keep her hand on it until it bent all the way. The ballroom of the Grand Hyatt Atlanta glittered with crystal chandeliers and the low murmur of anticipation. It was the annual Financial Innovation Summit, the gathering where Wall Street met Silicon Valley, where billion-dollar bets were whispered over cocktails and reputations were minted on stage. This year, the most anticipated panel was not about cryptocurrency, not about emerging markets, but about something once dismissed as soft, peripheral, almost laughable: inclusion. The sign above the main stage read, "Inclusive Investment Standards, the New Market Imperative." At the center of the stage sat Samantha Carter. She wore a tailored ivory suit, understated jewelry, and an expression of composed authority. On either side of her sat Patricia Hayes, now permanent CEO of Halcyon Dynamics, and representatives from 3 of the largest investment firms in America. The moderator leaned forward. 1 year ago, Halcyon Dynamics was in freefall. Its stock dropped 17% in a week after revelations of toxic culture. Today, under new leadership, it is outperforming the NASDAQ by 12%. Ms. Carter, did you anticipate this outcome when you chose not to invest? Samantha adjusted her microphone, her voice calm but carrying across the hall. This was never about punishing one company. It was about proving that discrimination has a cost. Markets price assets with incredible precision, yet for decades they ignored the value of human capital, of inclusive leadership. That distortion was irrational. The market corrected it. The audience, a sea of executives in suits, murmured with a mix of discomfort and reluctant admiration. Patricia Hayes added, "Initially, I saw these standards as a requirement to survive. Now I see them as a competitive advantage. Our recruitment costs are down 20%, applications are stronger, and retention is the best in company history." A slide appeared on the massive screen. Halcyon's new leadership team. Men and women, diverse in race and age, each with credentials that spoke for themselves. No tokens, No placeholders. Real authority. The transformation had not been easy. In the months following Richard Whitman's removal, Halcyon had nearly torn itself apart. Some executives resigned in protest. Others dragged their feet. Anonymous feedback channels revealed bitterness, resistance, resentment. But Patricia pushed forward. With Carter Equity's auditors overseeing, she implemented reforms that went deeper than PR. Pay audits revealed disparities and corrected them. Recruitment shifted to blind ORSM reviews. Mentorship programs paired junior women and minority employees with senior leaders. Promotion criteria were rebuilt around measurable performance rather than culture fit. The first months were painful. Lawsuits trickled in, shareholders complained, but slowly the numbers shifted. Productivity rose, turnover dropped. Clients, once wary, returned. By the time of the summit, Halcyon had become a case study not in scandal, but in rebirth. Whitman, meanwhile, had vanished from headlines. Disbarred from serving on any board, he attempted a quiet comeback with a venture in cryptocurrency, but mandatory disclosure of his discrimination record scared off investors. His name became shorthand in business schools. The Whitman effect. How arrogance could erase billions overnight. After the panel, Samantha retreated to a quiet corner of the ballroom. She disliked the spotlight, though it followed her relentlessly. A young woman approached nervously, clutching a notebook. "Ms. Carter, my name is Aisha Patel. I'm an analyst at Horizon Funds. I just wanted to say thank you. Seeing you up there, it makes me believe this industry might have a place for me." Samantha's expression softened. She gestured to an empty chair. "Tell me about your work." Or Mom, as Aisha spoke, Samantha listened intently, asking pointed questions, offering quiet advice. She knew these conversations mattered more than any headline. Power wasn't only about toppling giants. It was about opening doors for those who would come after. That evening, back at Carter Equity's headquarters, Samantha gathered her executive team. Screens displayed adoption rates of the new Carter Standard, a certification process for inclusive workplace practices that dozens of firms were now integrating into due diligence. "We've made progress," David Monroe reported. 12 major firms certified, 30 more in the pipeline. "Even the reluctant ones are moving. No one wants to be the next Halcyon," Lillian Price added. "We're seeing measurable shifts. In certified companies, diverse leadership has increased 15%. Employee satisfaction is up across the board." Samantha studied the data silently. It was gratifying, but she knew progress was fragile. "Our job isn't to celebrate early victories. It's to make this permanent. Culture changes slowly, but markets can enforce discipline faster than anything else. We keep the pressure on." Months later, Halcyon unveiled its new product line AI platforms genuinely shaped by diverse teams. The launch was hailed not only for technological innovation, but for the unusual transparency of its development process. Patricia Hayes stood at the podium, acknowledging mistakes openly, describing reforms in detail, watching from the audience. Samantha felt a quiet satisfaction. This was what justice looked like, not Whitman humiliated, not stock prices bleeding, but talent flourishing where it had once been silenced. The industry as a whole shifted. Venture firms began embedding culture assessments into investment contracts. Business schools updated curricula to include case studies on inclusive leadership. Publications once skeptical now wrote of the Carter Premium, the measurable value added by diverse teams. Critics still called it woke capitalism. Samantha answered them bluntly in an interview. "Capital is power. Power has always dictated who wins and who loses. The question isn't whether power shapes culture, it always has. The question is whether we're willing to shape it toward fairness. Markets punish inefficiency. Excluding talent based on prejudice is inefficiency, pure and simple." Her words circulated widely, quoted in op-eds and boardroom memos alike. 1 year after Whitman's fall, the summit honored Samantha Carter with the Industry Changemaker Award. As she approached the podium, Applause thundered. She did not bask. Instead, she used the moment to announce her boldest initiative yet. Today, Carter Equity launches a $10 billion fund exclusively for underrepresented founders. Too many brilliant ideas never receive funding because investors fail to see past their own biases. That ends here. We will not only demand accountability from corporations, we will build the future ourselves. The crowd rose to its feet. Cameras flashed. Headlines erupted. Later that night, in her quiet office overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Samantha allowed herself a rare smile. On the wall behind her hung Carter Equity's mission statement, etched in glass. Capital is power. Power requires responsibility. She thought of the young analysts she mentored each month, of Jessica Chen, who had testified with courage, of Aisha Patel with her notebook and nervous hope. The legacy she wanted wasn't her name in headlines. It was a future where those women wouldn't need to fight the same battles she had. The city lights flickered, reflecting off her window like a constellation. Each light a story, a possibility, a life reshaped by choices made in boardrooms. Richard Whitman had once believed power was the right to deny a handshake. Samantha Carter had shown that true power was choosing who to lift up. And somewhere out there, in offices, in classrooms, in late-night work sessions, a new generation was watching, taking notes, gathering courage, preparing to carry the torch further than she ever could. Samantha Carter's story proves that real power isn't in refusing a handshake, but in choosing to open doors for others. What would you do if you held the power to change an industry? If this story moved you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next powerful story. Every click is a handshake of fairness this world needs more of.